Have you ever noticed how your first love feels like the ruler you measure every other relationship against? Or do you still catch yourself comparing every I love you to the very first time you heard it? Or maybe you've realized that the chaos of that first relationship, the drama, the fighting, the constant breaking up and making up became your idea of what love is supposed to feel like. First love has a way of making the world feel like it cracked open just for you. Everything is brighter, louder, more intense. The text from them makes your entire day. The fights feel like the end of the world. Their presence feels like gravity, pulling you in, centering your entire orbit around one person. And that's why it marks us so deeply, because it's not just the relationship itself, it's the timing. It's usually when you're still figuring out who you are, what you believe, what matters to you, and suddenly someone else gets written into your story before you've even finished your first draft about yourself. That's why it feels unforgettable, because you weren't just falling in love, you were forming your identity at the exact same time. What we don't realize is how much of a blueprint that first love becomes. It doesn't matter if it was healthy or toxic, steady or chaotic, it leaves an imprint. If it was tender and patient, you probably grew up expecting love to feel safe. If it was messy and dramatic, part of you might still be wired to think that's what passion looks like. And it's not about romance, it's about the story you start to tell yourself. This is what love feels like. This is what it's supposed to look like. Even if you don't consciously say those words, your heart carries it. And years later, when you're with someone new, you catch yourself recognizing familiar patterns, the highs, the lows, the way it feels when someone says the right thing or ignores you for way too long. That's when it clicks. First love doesn't just end, it echoes. For some people, that echo is beautiful. Their first love showed them respect and kindness and consistency, and that became their forever standard. For the rest of us, and those of you like me, that echo feels heavier. Our first love came with games or control or heartbreak, and that becomes the baseline that we didn't ask for. And you usually don't even know the standard has been set until much later in life, when you've lived through other loves and realize, holy shit, I have been chasing and running from that first experience my whole life. So welcome back to Chasing Stability, where the in-between is somewhere in the middle of the first love that might have shaped you, but it definitely doesn't have to define you. It's a teacher, not a prophecy. And whether your forever standard feels lucky or heavy like mine, you have the power to rewrite it. And that's what we're talking about today, how first love becomes the blueprint. We're going to unpack why it feels so defining, what it teaches us, for better or worse, and how it sets the bar for what we think love should look like. We'll talk about the difference between getting lucky with the first love that sets a healthy standard versus learning love through chaos and confusion. We'll dig into how early lessons shape the way you date, the boundaries we set, and even the things we believe we deserve. And most importantly, we'll talk about how to break free from that standard that once hurt us and build new ones that actually serve who we are becoming now. So let's jump in. First love sticks with us in a way nothing else does. It's not just because it was the first. It's because of what it represented. Like, think about it. It's the first time you felt chosen, the first time you let your guard down, the first time you allowed yourself to fully imagine a future with someone else in it. And when you're that young, Those feelings are bigger than life. They're raw, they're unfiltered, and completely brand new. There's a reason people say you never forget your first love. It's because your brain literally stores it differently than the rest. Psychologists talk about emotional imprinting. That intense rush of hormones and newness literally burns itself into your memory. That's why, even years later, you can hear a song or smell their cologne or drive past a familiar street, and it all comes rushing back like it never left. Like you can feel it in your literal nervous system. But it's not just nostalgia. First love defines us because it's the foundation. It's where we start building our rule book about what love is supposed to feel like. If it was patient, safe, and consistent, then you might walk into future relationships expecting kindness. But if it was dramatic, chaotic, or hot and cold, sometimes that becomes the baseline. Suddenly, peace feels boring and chaos feels like passion, even if it's actually just called dysfunction. For some of y'all, that first love is a sweet, beautiful moment. Like, yeah, you got your heart broken, but it was respectful. And there are no memories around him or her that are painful. For others, it's a wound that keeps bleeding into future relationships. Either way, it's defining. And that's why so many of us spend our 20s and sometimes our 30s trying to untangle the imprint of that very first story. Some people hit the jackpot right out of the gate. And I'm so jealous of those people sometimes. Their first relationship is steady and kind and rooted in respect. It's the kind of love that sets a healthy standard. I like to call them the lucky ones. They walk away with a blueprint that says love should feel safe, love should be consistent, love should be thoughtful. And for them, everything that comes after has to meet that bar. It doesn't mean life is perfect, but they don't mistake chaos for passion because they never had to. In my mind, I usually think about kind of the idea that Gilmore Girls tried to create with Dean. I don't necessarily think it hit, but that's the kind of like first love that is the lucky ones, where it's somebody that truly, really loves you and sees you until maybe the end. I think about one of my friends, sometimes when I talk about like first love with other people, she met her high school sweetheart when she was 15 years old. And here they are 20 years later, married, still together, building a whole life side by side. For her, love always looked steady. He showed up, he cared, he stayed, and that became her standard. She never had to learn love through chaos because her first lesson was safety. Her first love taught her that love could be gentle, consistent, and dependable. And because of that, they stayed together forever. I'm sure it's not perfect every day. No one's relationship is, but she will never have to doubt that he will still pick her because he has been picking her for 20 years. And that's something a lot of people cannot say. But the rest of us, we're not so lucky. We're what I call the learners. Our first love wasn't just about butterflies and sweet memories. It was about fighting too much or being ignored or confusing mixed signals with real affection. It was about putting up with things that weren't love, but we thought they were because we didn't know any better yet. If you weren't one of the lucky ones, you're going to feel the story. My first love was dramatic. the kind of dramatic that makes people look at me now when I tell them stories about my first relationship, and they literally big-eyed look at me and ask me, did you grow up on One Tree Hill? Because that's exactly what it felt like. Chaos every other day, passion mixed with fights, love tangled up with screaming matches. We'd break up, make up, break up again. There were nights where I swore I hated him and mornings where I swore he was my soulmate. It was messy, it was loud, and it was intense. And back then I thought that intensity meant it was real. That fighting hard meant we were loving hard. That the roller coaster was proof of passion when really it was proof of dysfunction. Looking back, I can see how much that first relationship shaped what I thought love was supposed to look like. It made chaos feel normal, even honestly comfortable. It taught me to mistake highs and lows for depth. And that sucks because that stuck with me way longer than I would have ever liked to admit. The learners walk away with a very different blueprint. One that says love looks like arguing until 2 a.m. Love looks like begging for attention. Love looks like insecurity dressed up as passion. And because it's the first, it carves deep. It becomes the lens you see every future relationship through until you realize, wait, this doesn't have to be my standard anymore. That's the dividing line. The lucky ones get a head start. The learners get a life lesson. And honestly, the learners might end up stronger for it, but only if they do the work of unlearning all of the shit from the past. Because if you don't unlearn all of it, you'll keep choosing the same chaos over and over again, just in different bodies, different names, different faces. Trust me. So whether you were lucky or you were a learner, the point is this. First, love leaves its fingerprints on you. The question is, are you going to let that be the forever standard, or are you willing to rewrite the script if you weren't one of the lucky ones? Rewriting the standard looks like noticing when your body confuses peace with boredom. That's a big one. Realizing that consistency isn't bare minimum, it's actually safety. Understanding that if you always had to beg for attention in the past, you'll think begging is normal now, but it's not. It's weird at first because the things you used to chase feel exciting, but they're actually toxic. And the things that are stable can feel foreign, even too quiet. But that's the work of rewriting. Teaching yourself to stop romanticizing chaos and start expecting care. For me, this looked like breaking the habit of mistaking red flags for passion. It looked like sitting with discomfort and reminding myself, I don't need to fight for love. I just need to choose it with someone who's also choosing me. The standard you set after your first love is everything, because whether you know it or not, every relationship after will measure up to that until you rewrite it. Rewriting the standard isn't a one-time decision. It's a process. And sometimes it's uncomfortable because it means letting go of the blueprint you thought was normal and starting from scratch. That piece feels extremely boring because your nervous system has been trained to feel the rush and run on adrenaline. If your first love taught you that chaos equals passion, then quiet love feels like something's missing. Like you need to start a fight to feel something. But really, it's your body detoxing from that dysfunction. Rewriting the standard means slowing down enough to notice patterns. Why do I chase people who pull away? Why do I equate silence with rejection? Why do I feel more alive during a fight than I do during a moment of calm? Those questions don't feel romantic, but they're the building blocks of a new standard. And once you start building, everything shifts. You stop apologizing for asking for consistency. You stop calling the bare minimum effort. You stop being impressed by words when actions don't follow. For me, this meant realizing that just because I had learned love was chaos didn't mean I had to keep living there. I could decide that my standard now was steadiness. I could decide that my standard was effort. And maybe, most importantly, I could decide that I was no longer going to beg for things I deserved from the very beginning without any reason. Because love is not supposed to be an exhausting negotiation. And the moment that you learn that, you really learn it. You stop chasing chaos and start protecting your peace. That's when you know the standard has been rewritten. First loves don't just teach you about romance, they teach you about yourself. And sometimes they teach you all the wrong things. Chaos feels like passion. Inconsistency feels like desire. Heartbreak feels like proof that you cared. And we hold on to these lessons like they're unshakable truths. But that's where God came in for me. Growth is about unlearning too. And I believe God lets certain relationships break us down, not because he's cruel, but because he knows we can't carry those false lessons into who we are meant to be. Think about it. Perspective doesn't just arrive one morning when you wake up healed. It usually comes when you're looking back, connecting the dots you couldn't see at the time. That's where faith reframes the story. Instead of asking, why did I go through that? You start asking, what did I learn from that? Or what did it grow me into? For me, it was realizing that my first love wasn't about him. It was about God showing me what I couldn't settle for. The fighting, the chaos, the feelings like I had to earn being loved. Those weren't love at all. That was survival. And it took me much longer than just my first love to figure that out, and that was my lesson that I was supposed to learn. But when you finally shift your perspective to find what you are supposed to be learning, you see it. You see that God was teaching you, even then, to stop mistaking survival for love. That's growth. That's perspective. It doesn't erase the pain, of course, but it changes the way you carry it. And once you start carrying it differently, it stops being a chain and starts being a compass. So here's what I want to leave you with today. First, love has a way of shaping us in ways we don't even realize. It becomes the quiet measuring stick, the standard that whispers in the background of every relationship after. For some people, that standard is safe. For others, it was chaos. But here's the truth that I want you to take with you. Your first love might set the tone, but it doesn't get to write the ending. You do. If you grew up thinking love was supposed to feel like fighting and making up, you can rewrite that script. If you thought being ignored was normal, you can teach yourself that love is actually attention, care, and presence. If your first love left scars that made you believe you weren't enough, God, growth, and time will remind you that you always were enough. And if you were one of the lucky ones, if your first love showed you stability and tenderness, then your work is honoring that standard, not lowering it, not apologizing for it, and not changing because someone else thinks that it's weird that your standard is so high. Hold it proudly as proof that good love exists and you deserve it again and again. And also hold it up high so all of us who have never had it see it and know what we're looking for. What I hope you walk away with is love is not one size fits all, but it should never cost you your peace, your worth, or your sense of self. Your first love may have taught you lessons you didn't ask for, but maybe those lessons are the reason you'll recognize the right love when it finally does arrive at your front door. So here's to the learners, here's to the lucky ones, and here's to the people rewriting their forever standard right now. We are not behind. We are not broken. We are just building better, brick by brick, choice by choice. And maybe next time you fall in love, it won't feel like chaos or confusion. Maybe it'll just feel like home. And I hope that each and every single one of you finds that. Thank you for spending this time with me today. If this episode made you nod or laugh or feel seen, please share it with someone else who might need it. And if you want, please rate the episode. Make sure you follow us so other people can get pushed to listen to the podcast as well. And as always, this is Chasing Stability, and I will meet you in the in-between next Tuesday.